So from across the Tasman to a regional perspective, I'm delighted to be joined for this second interview of this week's Scrutineers by Nance Haxton from the Australian Broadcasting Corporation. Nance has been on the road covering stories for AM, PM, The World Today. She's been doing live broadcasts. Nance, it's so great to have you.
Thank you for inviting me, Anne.
What's the mood? You've been to Moranbah, you've been to Cairns, you've been to South Australia.
Flinders Ranges, yeah.
Indeed. What's the mood?
Well, I have to say it's pretty much the common theme through all of them is a sense of confusion, I have to say. I really felt that people still were, and people who perhaps traditionally would have been Labor voters around Moranbah as well, were very much, we feel let down by everyone. People, I don't know if either party is perhaps articulating what people's main concerns are. That's what I am feeling, that people feel let down, and there's that confusion. They don't know which way to vote even now. So 5 days out from the election, I think if there's a late swing either way, it could be quite telling.
Yeah, I mean, it's so interesting, isn't it? Because you would have thought that economic uncertainty and on the narrow margins that some of those seats were on, that Labor could pencil Capricornia into their column. The government has dropped a bundle of money in those seats around a whole variety of commitments.
Absolutely.
But that doesn't seem to be getting traction.
No, and I think Capricornia is perhaps interesting with the crossover of the state issues as well, because Campbell Newman's defeat is very fresh in all of our minds. But people in Moranbah, I actually think the electorate is constantly underestimated. They've really thought about what's happened to them, and they know very well FIFO is a big anxiety there, the fly in, fly out workers. It was the Anna Bligh government that brought that in, the compulsory 100% FIFO, and allowed that to happen at two of the big coal mines there.
Yeah.
So they remember that quite keenly, and they're not looking to Labor to save them from this mess, because now there's all these fly in, fly out workers that never come into town. The town's feeling it really keenly. There's been a lot of redundancies. They're not allowed to be employed at these mines.
Yeah.
So I think that's why they haven't really been able to gain that traction. People are feeling quite...
And the complexity with some of that, of course, is that many of them have bought properties in Mackay and other cities that have now got massive negative equity.
Yes.
And then Labor's negative gearing policy will be really problematic for them.
Exactly. No, they're underwater. Exactly. In one of my background briefing stories, I interviewed a woman who'd bought 4 properties in Moranbah, and you can imagine now, I mean, they were worth 700 grand and now they're worth 100, so if you're lucky. So they've been really, really caught out. But by the same token, they're also talking a lot about, I found in Cairns and Moranbah particularly, youth unemployment's a big issue.
Yeah, huge issue.
Where do our young people go? The coal mines are not providing apprenticeships the way they used to. Not everyone can work at McDonald's. What are we going to do, basically?
Or the kid's going to have to go away to go to university. It's going to cost, Labor's scare campaign around $100,000 degrees. I mean, if people are feeling anxious, it's no wonder.
That's right. And of course, Cairns, the big issue that I was looking at there was the reef as well, and I think that's going to be a big issue in people's minds around Australia, as well as just in Cairns, but that anxiety from the tourism industry of, oh no, everything's fine, coral bleaching isn't that bad, to professors at the university sort of saying, well, maybe it's actually not great. So
don't talk it down, talk it down, because we need the green shoots of tourism recovery, right?
That's right. And even the tourist companies were saying, look, we need to be honest about this. There's not enough talk about climate change. That's the root cause of this. It's not just coal mines and agriculture that are adding to this problem. It's a global problem, but the complexities of this seem to be lost in this campaign.
And are either of the leaders resonating, or you just didn't? Did you get a sense that, we've seen in the published polls the disappointment in Malcolm Turnbull? Did you pick up that, or Bill, the worker's friend? Did you pick up any of that?
I suppose what I'd pick up is that no one really mentioned either leaders. Do you know what I mean? Like,
oh no,
that's what. It's not like if it had been Bob,
the
or someone, they'd be like, oh yeah, I like Bob, or I hate him, or. But they haven't really made that big an impression, perhaps, and that's not helping with the I'm not sure who to vote for thing, because there's no one cutting through.
So this is the pox on both your houses kind of thing. What about at the level of the local candidates? We've got 2 candidates in Capricornia in particular. Michelle Landry, who's been around for a while, and then the lady who was a teacher, who's the principal, who's the Labor candidate. What's your sense of those kind of local dynamics?
I think, again, there's still... I just had that sense of we're not sure. Neither of them have really made an impression on me, so we're not sure which way to go.
I know, it's sort of intriguing. And a little bit north of there is George Christensen, who's a very conservative, very provocative kind of character, and quite brazen in his support for Tony Abbott, as far as Malcolm Turnbull's kind of prospects
and refugee
are
policies.
And refugee policies, yes, that whole business around Syrian refugee resettlement, which was quite surprising, given that it was his own government's policy. However, so what's the attitude towards him? I mean, that's on I think it's 8.6, or it's quite a safe margin. I think maybe it's 7.6, somewhere around that.
He could be very interesting. I think those seats, they're going to be very tight. I think late deciders are going to be really critical there. And again, I didn't really hear from people that they were impressed with him, or either way, that there was just that sense of confusion.
Yeah, I know. It's really the resonant theme throughout the whole thing, isn't it? And young people, did you get a chance to do any, talking to because I think the demography of this election is really interesting, and we've done something on the Machinery of Government blog about Gen Y and young people being really left out. Did you get an impression of that?
Yes, although I didn't get to speak to many young people. Ironically, it was actually more. I went to the rugby league, the Moranbah Miners training. That was interesting, and there was just they were fun, but perhaps just felt just disinterested. I think is possibly the best.
I know, of all the elections,
not engaged,
right?
Like whatever.
Of all the elections,
which is a shame, because their vote is going to be quite critical in that region in Capricornia.
Yeah. They should really be paying attention, shouldn't they, this time, because it's going to really matter. Now, what about agriculture? I mean, we've heard so little about agriculture. The government made much of the Northern Australia plan. We've kind of been waiting for the big announcement. But in fact, most of the commitments have been, not insignificant, but local commitments rather than sort of the big bang strategy.
True.
What's going on?
This is what I mean about it. I don't know if either party is actually speaking about people's main concerns. And I think perhaps this is where even the Medicare stuff has fallen short for Bill Shorten, because people are like, where did that come from? I've never really heard of this before. Actually, I'm more worried about what's going to happen with agriculture runoff and how's that going to impact sugarcane farms on which our economy is, hugely reliant. That's the stuff they should be talking, or the NDIS. In Queensland it's rolling out on July 1st. Who'd even know?
And one of the trial sites is in Cairns, yes?
That's right. And where's the reassurance? There is anxiety from people. Is this actually going to keep going ahead?
Yeah.
And they've not articulated that. Now, these are common concerns for people.
And that's an extraordinary job and growth opportunity, actually, really, the NDIS and the community
Talk
services
about youth unemployment. I mean, why don't we start, talking about, okay, how can we channel people with that propensity to go into some caring professions?
So what does this tell us about campaign strategy? I mean, I think, you and I were talking off camera about this. Actually, it's not a very good campaign from either side.
No,
it's kind of a weird...
It's been pretty dull.
Dull and long and probably expensive and not cutting through. So is this telling us something about professionalisation and maybe some of the disconnect that we saw come through so violently in the Brexit result last week?
Absolutely. And I mean, there's a few issues there. It just makes you wonder about polling. Can we rely on polling anymore with Brexit? And it also, I think, that links nicely back to so yes, the major parties are not speaking people's language, but people like Nick Xenophon do seem to be. I mean, and he has just engaged. So what are the differences in those campaigns? He is out talking to people, not just shaking their hands with a yellow vest on, but he does seem to actually speak people's... He's talking about the anxiety that a lot of people in South Australia feel, and it's going to shake it up down there. I've no doubt about it.
And he's just offering that little bit of protectionism that you can get away with in South Australia, because it's been their long tradition. But of course, Bill Shorten would say, and Labor would say, we've done 30 town hall meetings around the country and that sort of stuff. But it's interesting how that has translated.
I just wonder if there are some party machine people or layers that they need to look at. Where are we missing out? Where is that disconnect happening? Where am I not hearing what people are actually thinking?
Well, can I offer a prediction? And then I'm going to ask you for one. My prediction is that they'll do a post-election review, both parties, and neither of them will learn anything. Your prediction for Saturday, the 2nd of July, Nance?
Oh, look, I think it's too hard to call. The next few days are going to be interesting. We've got the media blackout coming up.
Hallelujah.
But people just don't know. So the Senate particularly is going to be really telling. In Queensland, is Pauline Hanson going to get in? Glenn Lazarus, and who is that other? What is that layout going to mean, basically? Let alone if Nick Xenophon gets some lower house seats as well. I mean, he's almost certain to get 3 or 4 Senate spots, but how is that going to change things? And particularly when he's not that traditional party formation, could there be a split Clive Palmer style, and what's that going to mean later on if that just disintegrates? So it's going to be a very interesting next term.
It's going to be a very interesting next term, and it's fantastic to have had you here today. Thanks so much for making the time.
Thank you, Anne.
And that's a wrap on Scrutineers, and we look forward to the result on 2nd of July, and we may even offer you some coverage after that, but it'll mostly be on our blog. Thanks to everyone who's been involved. It's been a lot of fun from our point of view, and we hope to catch up with you in November with our presidential election coverage.